The attorneys general for 11 states have sent an open letter to Attorney General William Barr asking the Justice Department to investigate potential antitrust concerns regarding the nation's 4 largest meatpacking companies. They say potential price fixing could hurt farmers and ranchers along with consumers who may already be struggling with food insecurity during this global pandemic. Joining us now is Senator Kevin Cramer, a Republican from North Dakota, one of the first to call for an investigation into price fixing in this industry. And Senator, considering what we're seeing, where you have the price fixing issue, and I'm curious, are we now watching the downside of the consolidation of this industry as we run into this meat shortage due to their inability to navigate this crisis?
So, Chuck, thanks for the opportunity. And I think what you're touching on is, it seems like 2 different issues, but they're really 2 in the same. But the one, the COVID-19, and particularly when you start not being able to get a hamburger at Wendy's, it becomes real close to home that we have a consolidation problem of meat packing that's exacerbated or exposed by the COVID-19 pandemic. So I think that, the problem of concentration has been around a long time, probably for, 2, 3 decades at least. But it's certainly been exposed, like many of our other supply chains have been exposed.
So what would you specifically like to see change? Is there a regulatory, is there a legal change? What would you like to see that would sort of disaggregate this meat process? I mean, I was reading a story today about Europe. There have been some problems at meatpacking plants, but because that business isn't so consolidated there, there's simply more processing plants around Europe, so they're not having the same issue.
So great point, Chuck. So diversity of lots of things, of lots of supply chains has its value. Now there's concentration because that has economic value. Obviously, the scale. One of the reasons that we saw a lot of consolidation in the 80s and 90s, for example, was technology came along and it just made it a lot more efficient and it was economical. Now, of course, when we're down to 4 processors who have 80% of the market in the United States, and one's a Chinese-owned company, one's a Brazilian-owned company, they control the whole supply chain. So just as an example, January 1st, the price that a rancher got for a cow was $125 a hundredweight, and the price that you paid for a steak at the store was like $2.50. On April 5th, that cow was down to $88 for the rancher, but the steak nearly doubled in price. And this inverse pricing relationship exposes an economic problem with consolidation. The diversity you're talking about, I think, is what we need to get back to. Now, what we're asking the Attorney General to do is check on, do an investigation in antitrust violations. While they can't tell us whether they are or aren't doing one, we hear from folks that they maybe are. But that said, how do you get back to what once was? And I think some of it has to be market-oriented. I think states have a lot to say about it. You can do state-inspected plants. I'd like to see a lot more. And I think I know our ranchers would like to too, because right now they're held captive by such a small, concentrated group of packers.
Nothing helps competition. Nothing helps in some ways if you had more competing in the market. Katie Tur, next question for the senator.
Senator, it's good to have you. Where do you stand on the liability shield that's being proposed for businesses, including meat packing plants?
Well, Katie, I think given this extraordinary moment that we're in and all of us being in the same boat, and when I say all of us, I mean higher education, healthcare, business, workers, the employees and the customers, I think we need to have some sort of a liability shield. We're already seeing rapid lawsuits at universities and university systems around the country. There's one I heard about today that a number of students, a lawyer found a number of students, and now they're suing for harmful damage to the student because they didn't get to finish the year in their dorm. I mean, this frivolous stuff is what happens in times like these. And just like the meatpacking situation, we expose other challenges, other vulnerabilities in our system, and this is one of them. I think we owe it to everybody to tamp down on the liability parade, if you will.
Well, let me drill down on that, because I'm asking not so much about students suing colleges. I'm asking more about the workers who are being asked to go back to work and to take on that health risk in a plant or even at another place of business, who might potentially get sick. Aren't they already covered? Aren't our businesses already covered by workers' compensation? Why do you need to add another layer to protect a business from a potential lawsuit from a worker, isn't it better to have the worker have that leverage in order to say to the business, hey, you got to put protections in place to make sure that I can reasonably protect myself if I'm going to come into work for you?
Well, there's every possible incentive for the employer to take care of the workers, and we're seeing it every day right now being played out. To your the beginning of your point, they already have workers' compensation insurance, which insures, of course, the employer, but it also provides revenue to the employee should they get injured or sick on the job. So really what we're asked for is to leave it at that and to not put the kinds of restrictions on the business that they can't even operate, because we've got to get our economy going again. That's to the benefit of everybody, every employer and employee at every level. Now, we shouldn't simply cover up or provide an excuse for gross negligence, and I wouldn't support that. But some sort of a liability reform that protects against what we're going through right now and prevents the ambulance chasers from taking economic advantage of people in a very vulnerable time, I think is entirely appropriate.
Senator, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about the oil and gas industry and how obviously how important it is to North Dakota's economy, North Dakota's revenue. I think you're one of two states where I think half of the state budget, I think, comes in some form from that industry. How concerned are you, and how much help do you think you're going to need from the federal government?
Yeah, so good question, Chuck. What I ask for basically is that the oil and gas industry, that all of the support, the financial support, whether it's through the Paycheck Protection Program or any other part of the CARES Act, some of the credit tools that the Federal Reserve is coming out with, that they be industry neutral so that the oil and gas industry can utilize them as much as anybody. Now, one of the challenges with oil and gas, I think oil and gas, like food, is a critical supply chain. It doesn't pay to be energy independent if we don't exercise our independence, for example, and that energy dominance allows us some source of national security in a pretty significant way, not to mention economic security. But North Dakota has a lot of smaller companies in the supply chain, including many of the oil producing companies themselves. So I don't want to see the same kind of consolidation with a handful of very large oil companies, multinationals, that control the price of everything, and revenue and investment follows them overseas. I want to see that, again, back to your earlier point, that more diverse supply. So what I'd like to see is, I'd like to see some tool come out of all of this that provides an opportunity for the highly leveraged companies to find some way to restructure their existing debt. The current tools provide some revenue and some credit facilities to bridge loans. But what I think they really need, and what can get them to the other side when price is back with the demand, would be some sort of restructuring of debt. Not simply a handout or a grant, but debt restructuring would be good.
Senator Cramer, I appreciate your time with us today, and you bring up an interesting fear I know that some people have in a lot of industries, which is at a time like this, big gets bigger and vulnerable gets gobbled up. And I can see that fear in an industry like fracking, where all of a sudden a couple of entities have cash to throw around. So something to be on the lookout for there as well. Senator Cramer, thank you for coming on and sharing your views. Sure. Katie and I appreciate it.
Thanks to both of you.
Katie,
my pleasure for both.